I'm not someone who believes in the paranormal. Never have been. But I have one experience that I cannot explain away no matter how hard I try. And I stopped trying a long time ago. 4th grade. My best friend Gage and I were sleeping over at Eric's house for his birthday, along with his 2 brothers. His mom had rented a pile of movies for the night, but we only made it through 1 or 2 before everyone drifted off in the living room. Gage had no idea that Eric's family believed the house was haunted, something about a kid who had fallen from a truck and been hit by a car just outside. They had never seen anything themselves, just a feeling that had settled into the walls over the years. I was asleep on the floor in the middle of the room when something hit me. I opened my eyes and saw Gage sitting up on the couch in the moonlight, finger to his lips, waving me over. Half asleep and annoyed, I asked him what was going on. He said he had heard footsteps while he was sleeping. When he looked around, everyone was still asleep. He had been sitting there alone with it for a while. Then he told me the real reason he woke me up. He had seen an old man and a teenage boy standing over me, looking like they were about to attack me. Then they vanished. I was skeptical. Told him he had been dreaming. Tried to go back to sleep. We sat on that couch together for the better part of an hour in near silence before I finally started drifting off again. Then I heard footsteps. I opened my eyes. Gage was still right beside me. I looked toward the kitchen, which was separated from the living room by a wall only visible from the couch. I blinked and heard pots and pans shifting around. Nobody was awake. I stopped blinking as long as I could stand it. When I finally did, a teapot started whistling. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just stared into the dark. A minute passed. I blinked. The kitchen light turned on. I blinked again. The teapot went silent. One more blink, and I saw it. Standing in the middle of the fluorescent kitchen light was a figure draped in black. Despite the light blazing directly above it, there was no definition to it at all. No face, no hair, no clothing detail. Just a solid shadow in the shape of something that was looking straight at me. The rest of the house seemed to go completely black, like the world had narrowed down to just the couch, the kitchen, and whatever that thing was. I was completely paralyzed. Eventually I blinked, and it was gone. The sounds unwound in reverse light-off, pots shuffling, teapot quiet. The house became just a house again. After a long silence, Gage spoke. He asked if I had seen it. Then he described everything, detail by detail, exactly as I had experienced it. He could see the part of the kitchen I couldn't from where he sat. He told me it had been floating about 6 inches off the ground. We didn't sleep. We didn't move. We left the moment the sun came up. Years later, when I read about Dementors in Harry Potter, the way they drain the light and take over the atmosphere and press into your mind, I felt like I already knew exactly what that was. I had felt it already. Sitting on that couch in the dark, I had felt exactly that. I don't believe in ghosts. I believe in paychecks. That's the only reason I found myself working on a paranormal television show with a friend, shooting a pilot at one of the most notorious houses in the city. The first house gave me the creeps in a general atmospheric way. Some unexplained noises, a box with LED lights that supposedly lit up in the presence of spirits, a medium who claimed there were portals in the basement, one so ancient he could only shrink it rather than close it entirely. A ghost cat apparently jumped out of one of them. An EVP recorder picked up something that sounded like a meow at exactly that moment. I filed all of it under interesting coincidence and moved on. A network gave us money to shoot a second episode. This time, a house with a darker reputation, a supposed serial killer, bodies allegedly buried in the basement. I walked in and felt nothing. No unease, no atmosphere, no creeping dread. Just a normal house. I was almost disappointed on a professional level. Then, the night progressed. During an EVP session in the master bedroom, which was rumored to have once served as a performance altar, we spent an hour getting very little. Then something started coming through referencing demons. We pushed at it without much result. Just as we were about to shut everything down, a voice cut through the white noise completely clearly, speaking in Spanish. The only Spanish speaker in the room went quiet for a moment and then translated. "Stop getting in my way. Evil will prevail. Evil will rise. Stop getting in my way." We shut it down for the night. The next evening we set up in the dining room with different equipment, another EVP box, and special cameras hooked to iPads that could detect pressure and temperature variations and attempt to map them into a visible figure on screen. A stick figure, rendered in real time from data the camera was pulling out of the air. We made contact with what claimed to be the serial killer. According to the session, he was furious, had a demon enslaved, and was threatening to unleash it on us. I was sitting at the table, half engaged, half observing, when something stopped me completely. Cold air around my ankles. Just my ankles. Nowhere else on my body, just a drift of cold pooling around my feet under the table. I had heard this described 100 times as a classic sign and had never once taken it seriously. I said nothing and got up quietly, moving to stand in the corner about a foot from the wall. I stood there for a minute, and then, without any sound or movement or logical trigger, I simply knew something was behind my left shoulder. I asked one of the guys with the special camera to point it toward me. The screen began rendering a figure approximately 8 feet tall, exactly where I felt it. I turned around. Nothing visible. Just cold air. Someone screamed. They said something had scratched their arm. The camera swung toward them and began tracking the figure standing directly over their position. The room was escalating fast. And then from the kitchen, which was visible through the open doorway, came a loud crack and a flash of light. No lights were on in there. About half the room saw it. I caught it at the edge of my vision. We ended the session and I walked into the kitchen to find whatever had caused it. There was nothing. No broken glass, no damage, no explanation. Just empty space where something had clearly just happened. The person who said they had been scratched rolled up their sleeve. 3 scratch marks slowly appeared on their arm as we watched. I went into that house a non-believer. I came out not knowing what I am anymore. But whatever framework I used to understand the world, that weekend put something in it that wasn't there before. 7 years ago, I was staying at my girlfriend's family lake house in the White Mountains. Her family owned every property around this tiny private lake, completely isolated, completely theirs. We had her parents, my best friend, and her sister along for the trip. The first 3 days were perfect. Drinking, shooting skeet, kayaking, all of it. Then everyone had to leave for work. I went to start my car, and it died on the spot. Happy enough to stay a few extra days, we waved everyone off and called AAA. What we hadn't fully registered yet was that every other person within a 5-mile radius had just left with them. It was just us now. We called late in the day, so we weren't shocked when AAA couldn't make it out. Fine. We'd wait. The next day we kayaked, shot some bows, called AAA periodically from the one phone that actually worked up there, the landline in the house, because the White Mountains eat cell service for breakfast. By evening, they told us a guy was on his way, but about 2 hours out. Then the sky turned, and a full monsoon rolled in. Not an exaggeration, torrential rain hammering the roof, thunder shaking the windows. When the time came that the guy should have been getting close, we grabbed our bags, their hilariously chaotic dog, and made our way to the car parked about 100 meters from the house. We sat in the car listening to the rain pound the hood like something trying to get in. After a while, I decided to run down the road to flag the AAA guy down. I grabbed my largest machete and a heavy-duty flashlight and took off into the dark. The road stretched about 1.5 miles to where it connected to the main network. I ran the whole way and reached the end to find absolutely nothing. No headlights, no movement, just pitch black in every direction. That was when I heard the first howl, then another, then several more closer than the first. Gray wolves, White Mountains. Right. I ran back faster than I have ever run in my life, the howls multiplying behind me and closing in. I arrived at the car completely out of breath, wild-eyed, machete in hand, flung the door open, and was met with the full-volume scream of my girlfriend as her dog launched off the back seat directly onto my chest. I yelled at her to grab her stuff while wrestling the dog off me. We never got through to AAA again that night. The next morning, we woke up to a thick fog sitting over the entire lake. Naturally, we decided to kayak into it. About 15 minutes out, my girlfriend pointed across the water toward her uncle's house and asked what that was. On the far shore, hanging off a branch, was something white, long and pale. I told her it was probably a sheet caught in a tree. Then it looked at us. As we drifted closer, it became clear this was not a sheet. It was a figure. Tall, white, hooded, no visible face. Something vaguely resembling a grim reaper drained of all color. We sat in our kayaks in dead silence, just staring at it. And then it moved. Slowly, almost peacefully, in the most deeply unsettling way imaginable, it shifted toward the beach and came to rest beside an outdoor clothing rack in her uncle's backyard. I had been at that house a few days earlier and nearly put my eye out on the corner of that rack. Standing next to it, this thing came up to about where the waist would be on a normal person. That rack hit me at eye level. Whatever this was stood roughly 10 feet tall. My girlfriend suggested we paddle closer for a better look. I declined firmly and started rowing back. A few hours later, we finally got through to AAA. They had some news for us. The driver they had sent out the night before, they hadn't heard from him either. We spent that night drinking mojitos and taking a quiet inventory of the household shotguns. A friend eventually drove a part out to us and got the car running. We made it home fine. The AAA driver situation was never explained to us. Best vacation I ever had, honestly. But that thing on the shore has never fully left me. My boyfriend and I were house hunting a few years ago when we came across a nice single-story home in a good neighborhood. We called the agent and booked a viewing. When we arrived, the agent introduced us to the owner, an older man sitting in an armchair who nodded in our direction but didn't get up. We toured the living room, the family area, and a beautiful kitchen with gorgeous wood cabinets. Family photos lined the walls, grown children, grandchildren, generations captured in frames. The house had a warm feeling to it, but also something else underneath. A quiet sadness, an emptiness that didn't quite match the warmth. As we moved toward the bedrooms, the hallway turned cold. Not a draft, just cold. Dark in a way that had nothing to do with the lighting, because every light in the house was blazing the way they do during a showing. I couldn't shake it. Outside the master bedroom, the agent told us we could look inside, but the owner had asked that we not step in, as he was still living there. She opened the door and stepped aside. I was already feeling unusually cold and heavy when I looked through the doorway. There was a woman standing just inside, older, still. She looked like I was seeing her through watercolors washed out, edges soft and blurred. She was staring directly back at us, and from her came a sorrow so overwhelming it had no words for it. In that moment, I simply knew, the way you sometimes just know things, that she was his wife, and that she was still there because he was suffering so much without her. Then she was sitting at the foot of the bed, her hand moving slowly across the covers. She communicated without speaking that this was where she had died after a long illness, and that he had never once left her side. She raised her head and looked directly at me, and I heard her voice inside my own head. How can I leave him when he is so sad and lonely? It hurts so much to see him this way. My boyfriend grabbed my shoulder, and I came back to myself. He was staring at me, looking deeply concerned. I was crying hard, tears running freely down my face. I told him what I had seen. His wife was still there. She had died there. She couldn't leave because he was too sad. He handed me the car keys and told me to go wait while he finished up with the agent. I sat in the car and sobbed for a long time. When he came back, he told me what he had managed to find out. The old man was selling the house to move in with his son. His wife had recently died of cancer. When my boyfriend gently tried to find out whether she had passed in the house, the agent changed the subject. We never bought that house. But I have never forgotten her face through that doorway, or the weight of what she said, or the realization that grief doesn't only belong to the living. That when someone cannot let go, it holds the people they love on both sides of whatever comes next. I was 17 and freshly moved out of my parents' house to live with my boyfriend in his small apartment near the school. At first, everything felt exciting, but slowly a negative presence started weighing on us. I'd had paranormal experiences before, so I was sensitive to it. I felt something dark was following us and poisoning our relationship. We had 2 black and white cow cats. Cowcat 1 was a big, friendly floof. Cowcat 2 was a short hair who only liked certain people and absolutely loved sleeping in our cat carrier in the living room. One night, I decided to talk to my boyfriend about the presence. I sat at the end of the couch closest to the carrier, with him right beside me. Cowcat 2 was asleep in the carrier, and Cowcat 1 was on our bed in the bedroom. As I described what I felt, an image formed in my mind of a girl in a white nightgown with long black hair. I told him, I also feel like she has a black cat for some reason. The second the words left my mouth, a black cat walked out from behind the couch. Its back was to us. We both stared as it calmly headed straight toward the cat carrier. Cowcat 2 exploded out of the carrier like lightning, flew across the room, jumped onto the back of the opposite couch, and sprinted into the bedroom. We jumped up and ran after her. She was cowering behind the toilet while Cowcat 1 just lay on the bed looking at us like we were crazy. I asked my boyfriend, "Did you see that?" He said, "Yes, a black cat." We searched the entire apartment. The front door and all windows were closed. There was no trace of any third cat. It had appeared from nowhere and vanished completely. I would have thought I was hallucinating if Cowcat 2 hadn't seen it too. To this day, I still don't know what it was. I've never believed in ghosts. I'm still skeptical the idea that we continue existing after death feels too optimistic to be real. But I had one very strange experience. In college in Chicago, my friends and I rented a bizarre loft apartment that used to be a bar from before Prohibition. The conversion was minimal, dividing walls that didn't reach the ceiling, a makeshift shower, and the old bar counter removed. That was about it. The basement was especially creepy. It contained a turn-of-the-century beer cooling vault, a heavy wooden room with a thick door, and suspicious hooks and hoses hanging from the ceiling. My room had a closet built under the stairs leading to the upper apartments. It had an outer door, then an inner door leading to a tiny space under the lower steps. Behind that was a trap door in the floor, nailed shut. All 3 doors had locks on the outside. Curious, I checked the basement and discovered the trapdoor opened into a completely sealed-off room with no other entrance. One afternoon, I was sewing in my room when the closet doors kept popping open by themselves. We used to joke about a ghost because of the creepy basement, but I assumed it was just a draft. I kept closing them. They kept opening. Eventually, I got annoyed because the doors kept hitting my chair and ruining my rhythm. I latched the door firmly, sat back down, and right in front of me the latch popped open on its own. The doors swung open hard and smacked my chair. Frustrated, I stood up and shouted, "Fuck off, you stupid ghost. I'm trying to get work done." The doors immediately swung shut by themselves. The latch dropped back into place. After that, they never popped open again. I feel a little bad now. Sorry I yelled at you, spooky ghost. I thought I was just messing around. There was also the microwave incident. We had brought in a normal microwave that had never acted strange before. One day, it started turning on by itself when no one was in the room, nuking nothing. Then it glitched out and flashed 6 hours, 66 minutes on the display. All 4 of us who lived there moved in fine, but moved out less than a year later. Each of us had a serious, unexpected nervous breakdown during our time there. We laughed off the ghost and blamed the microwave on being faulty. But looking back, it was a very weird place. I was visiting my friend's house in a city known for its old haunted homes. She's a sharp, skeptical doctor and a committed atheist. When she told me, "I'd love for you to visit, but fair warning, my house is haunted," I believed her immediately. We've been friends since birth, our moms are close, and we basically grew up together. She had described strange events, furniture moving in locked rooms, objects violently thrown across the floor, her dogs refusing to enter the basement, and once seeing a semi-transparent figure in the driveway. The small house wasn't very soundproof, so every sound carried. You entered through the side door into a long hallway. Basement and bedroom doors on the left, kitchen further down on the left, living and dining rooms on the right. Most of the activity happened in the dining room. The first night, we said goodnight. She went into her bedroom with her dogs and closed the door. I was settling on the living room couch when the side door suddenly opened and slammed shut. I jumped, but told myself it was just the old storm door and wind. Then came the footsteps. Huge, booming steps like a massive person in heavy boots, slowly walking down the hallway. My friend is tiny, around 100 pounds. Her dogs are medium-sized. Even my 350-pound ex in steel-toed boots never sounded this loud. I sat frozen as the heavy footsteps approached. They reached the living room entrance, directly across from her bedroom door, and stopped. I could sense it turning to stare at her closed door. When I finally looked up, a massive shadow filled the entire hallway, stretching over her door. It felt solid like the back of a dark, towering creature. I'm not religious or spiritual, but instinct took over. I kept my head down, repeating silently, "Go away. Leave her alone. Pick on someone your own size." An invisible pressure pushed my head toward the coffee table. After what felt like forever, the pressure vanished. I looked up, the shadow was gone. I had a panic attack for nearly an hour before I could sleep. The rest of the visit was quiet. I'll never forget that terror. Years later, my friend learned the previous owner had hanged himself from the dining room ceiling lamp. The man she saw in her driveway matched his photo exactly. She turned the dining room into a guest bedroom and had the house exorcised by a priest. She's still an atheist and still lives there, but now every room has a crucifix. It happened in the 1980s in India. Back then, bathrooms weren't attached to the house. You had to walk across the backyard to a separate building. One chilly December night, my mom needed to use the bathroom, but was scared to go alone in the dark. She asked her mother to accompany her. Grandma waited outside while Mom went in. When Mom came out, she saw a lady standing right next to Grandma. Surprised, she assumed it was one of the farm workers her father employed. "Hey, who are you?" Mom asked. "What are you doing here so late? Dad's not home right now. Please come back tomorrow." Grandma turned pale. There was no one standing beside her. Mom was pointing at thin air. Grandma didn't waste a second. She grabbed Mom's arm and rushed her inside the house. She asked Mom to describe the woman. Mom said it was a stout, tall lady wearing a red saree with a gray necklace. Grandma went cold. She had seen the exact same woman in the backyard years earlier, but had never told anyone. She immediately started chanting holy mantras and waited anxiously for Grandpa to return. When Grandpa heard the story, he nodded calmly as if he already knew. He fetched the family album, opened it, and showed them a photo. It was unmistakably the same woman, his mother, Mom's grandmother, who had died long before Grandma and Grandpa got married. He admitted he had seen her a few times in the backyard, too. "She loved sitting out there on cold winter nights," he said. "She loved this house deeply. Don't worry, she won't harm anyone." To this day, people say her spirit still wanders the ancestral home during winter. Neighbors claim they've seen her many times, sitting quietly in the backyard, staring up at the sky. Sophomore year of college, I shared a dorm suite with 3 guys, 2 per bedroom, and a common living room. I roomed with Travis, Alec, and Tom were across the hall in the other bedroom. Early in the semester, Travis and I were in our room when his Xbox suddenly turned on by itself. He screamed. He was sitting on his bed, nowhere near the console or controller. It kept happening a few times a week. We tried to brush it off as power surges, but it still unnerved us. We also started hearing things moving in the living room, which we blamed on wind or the air conditioner. When I brought my own Xbox to school and set it up, It began turning on by itself, too. One afternoon, I was alone at my desk when Travis's Xbox powered on. I muttered, "You've got to be kidding me." And mine immediately turned on right after. We still tried to find rational explanations. One morning, Travis asked me, "What were you writing last night?" I had no idea what he meant. He turned pale and told me he'd woken up around 3 a.m. to the clear sound of pencil scratching on paper at my desk. He heard distinct letters curving S's, crossing T's, periods and pauses between sentences. No lights were on. When we checked my desk, there was nothing written anywhere. Things got creepier. One night we were both in bed, me reading, Travis on his phone, when I looked up and saw a shadowy figure walking straight toward me from our closed door. I could make out its torso, arms, and legs, and clearly see the carpet between its steps. After 3 steps, I yelled and bolted to Travis's side of the room. Our roommates across the hall had been in their room the whole time and hadn't left. Another night, while I was away for the weekend, Travis stayed behind. He was on his hands and knees in the corner looking for an outlet when he stood up and saw a black figure dart across the room toward my bed. He grabbed his pillow and slept on the floor in our roommate's room. Only Travis and I experienced most of the activity, but twice, Alex saw something too. Once, while I stood in their doorway talking to him, his coat hanger on the closet door suddenly lifted and dropped with a bang. Another time, mid-conversation, Alec froze with a horrified look and stared behind me. He described the same shadowy torso and legs I had seen. One evening I was typing at my desk, which faced the bedroom door. In the reflection of my laptop screen, I saw a head and shoulders cross the doorway from the living room. I jumped up and checked the entire suite, but I was completely alone. During a hangout with friends in our room, I was sitting on my bed when the mattress suddenly shifted, as if someone had sat down right next to me. No one was near me. While I was explaining it, my Xbox turned on by itself. Everyone bolted. Throughout the year, we heard fingernails tapping on my wooden desk, my TV remote sliding across it, pens falling off on their own, and objects moving or disappearing. One hungover morning, I heard something slide across the living room table. The only thing there was an empty vodka bottle. When I slid it myself, it made the exact same sound. The window was closed. I never believed in ghosts before that year, and I still don't, really. But Travis and I could never explain any of it. We never felt threatened, just unsettled. It made for a very interesting year. In November 2011, my mother suffered her second major stroke and had to go into long-term care. My husband and I had just moved out of state to his first military posting, but it was only a 5-hour drive, so we spent Thanksgiving with my dad at the house I grew up in. That house had always been creepy. For years, we heard footsteps upstairs while we were all downstairs, saw shadows darting around, and caught glimpses of things that shouldn't have been there. I hated leaving my dad alone. He was already ill and slowing down, though we didn't know it was cancer yet. We convinced him to move in with us, but we couldn't bring him right away. He needed time to sort through 30 years of stuff, and we were living in a tiny one-bedroom place. We planned to return in 6 weeks, right after the new year. My dad hated phones. He grew up before landlines were common and would usually cuss his cell until it stopped ringing. But after we left, he started calling me every single day. I knew something was wrong. When I asked, he only said the house was getting weird again. Finally, my husband got a few extra days of leave. We drove back to pack up Dad and bring him home. The 2 nights we spent in that house are burned into my memory. Whatever lived there was furious we were leaving for good. Boxes we packed would be moved or unpacked by morning. Strange knocks echoed through the walls, and faint voices drifted from empty rooms. The first night, my husband and I were trying to sleep when heavy stomping started upstairs in the attic, my old teenage bedroom with its hardwood floors. We knew Dad hadn't gone up there. I got up and found him sitting on the couch in the living room. He asked if the noise had woken us too. My husband joined us, and we stayed up talking for hours. That's when Dad finally opened up. The frantic pacing overhead had become a nightly occurrence right where my bed used to be. It started the night he began packing and told me when we'd come get him. The darting shadows by the back door had returned after 15 quiet years. Doorknobs would suddenly jiggle while we sat talking late into the night. For years we'd ignore it, or Dad would grab his machete and flashlight and check outside, only to find nothing. We eventually went back to bed and lay there listening to the pacing, until exhaustion finally pulled us under. It happened again the second night. 6 months after we got him out, my dad passed away. He was so relieved to be free of that house. I was just grateful he didn't die there alone. We recently moved back to my hometown. Right after we arrived, my husband wanted to drive past the old house. A wave of dread washed over me the moment I saw it. The new owners had changed the yard and exterior, but I still felt the same chill. I'd love to know if they've experienced anything, but nothing could make me step foot inside that house again. About 10 years ago, I took over the lease of a small apartment from a friend who couldn't afford it anymore. Under 500 square feet, just me and my cat. I didn't have a bed yet, so I was sleeping on the couch in the living room. A few days in, my cat started waking me up at 3 in the morning, almost every single night. He would come tearing out of the bedroom, screaming, tail fully puffed, visibly shaken. I would calm him down, we would fall back asleep, and the next night it would happen again. Then my boyfriend moved in. He worked nights and got home around 2 in the morning, which meant most evenings I was alone. One of those first nights I had the TV on and a glass of wine poured. Cat settled beside me, back against the wall on the couch. I could see straight down the hallway, bathroom door on one side, bedroom door on the other, the hallway light on in between them. The light flickered. Not an electrical flicker, more like something had passed in front of it. A shadow moving through a space where nothing should have been moving. I surprised myself with what I did next. I called out into the apartment, told whatever was there that I knew it was present and to show itself. About 15 seconds later, at the edge of my vision, something appeared in front of the lamp on the kitchen counter. Shorter than me. Human in shape, but without any features, not dark like darkness, more like black fog. Solid enough to register, but not solid enough to be real. It held for a few seconds and then simply dissolved. I called my grandmother. She calmed me down. We hung up. Then, for reasons I still can't fully explain, I called it back. I sat on the couch and spoke to the room again. Thanked it for showing itself. Said I needed one more thing, proof I wasn't losing my mind. I pointed to an empty plastic water bottle sitting on the coffee table and asked it to pick the bottle up. Before I finished the sentence, the bottle rose about 6 inches off the table. It shook violently, rattling back and forth, and steam began forming from the little water left in the bottom. I told it to stop. The bottle dropped. Steam clouded the inside. Then something pushed me, a blast of hot energy that moved through me so fast and so hard I was thrown back into the couch cushions. I called my grandmother again. She could hear screaming through the phone and the line kept cutting out. She told me to light candles and say a prayer. Every candle I lit went out. No fans running, no windows open. Just out, one after another. I grabbed my cat and left. When my boyfriend got home from work, we went back together and it seemed quiet. It wasn't. We started sleeping in the bedroom that week. The apartment was old, so many layers of paint on the door frame that you needed your full body weight to push it back open once it was shut. We shut it every night. Every night, it opened on its own, without a sound. We would lie there side by side holding hands, staring at the empty doorway, not speaking. Dishes rattled in the sink. From the living room came the sound of children playing and what sounded like old radio music drifting through from somewhere that didn't exist. The worst of it happened during my naps. I worked odd hours and slept during the day most weeks. Almost every single time I drifted off, I would be jolted awake by a woman screaming directly into my ear. Not a sound in the room, a voice. Right there, like someone had their mouth against my ear, but also somehow far away at the same time. Every single time. Like clockwork. It all stopped the day we moved out. I've lived in a few haunted places over the years, so there's no shortage of stories. These are from when I lived in Georgia with my ex, who I'll call X. Worth noting that most of this happened in the middle of the day. One afternoon, X went next door to her mother's place. A little while later, I heard the front door open and close, then footsteps crossing the living room toward the kitchen. I waited a few minutes, then texted her asking why she hadn't come to say hi, like she always did. She replied that she was still at her mother's and hadn't come home yet. I got up and checked every inch of that small house. Both doors were locked. The front couldn't lock without a key. The back could only be locked from the inside. There was nobody there. Sun blazing outside, middle of the afternoon, completely empty. The ceiling fan in my room had a habit of turning itself on. It ran off a pull cord, not the wall switch, so there was no logical explanation for it. It happened so regularly that eventually I just said out loud, "Knock it off." It stopped after that. While I was back in Massachusetts visiting family, X texted me one night in a panic. She had been lying in my bed watching TV with the dog when the bedroom doorknob started shaking violently, like someone trying to force it open. The door had no lock. If anything had actually been turning that knob, it would have opened easily. The dog just stared at the door, looking uneasy. I told her to speak out loud, tell whatever it was that it was scaring her, and ask it to stop. She did. It stopped immediately. The clearest thing I ever saw happened one afternoon while I was sitting on my bed with my laptop. I felt suddenly and completely watched. I looked up toward the end of the hallway and saw a man standing there. Tall, brown hair, broad shoulders, wearing a red checkered shirt and blue overalls. Except he wasn't entirely there. He was partially transparent, and from roughly the waist down there was simply nothing, no legs. Just gone. His arms hung at his sides. I stared at him for a moment, genuinely stunned, then looked away without meaning to. When I looked back, he was gone. The last story happened after X and I split up, and I was living there alone. I was standing in my room when I heard the bathroom tap turn on by itself. I went and shut it off, checked everything, found nothing loose or faulty. Went back to my room. The water came back on. I shut it off again. The moment I stepped back through the doorway of my room, it came back on at nearly full force. I was less scared than annoyed. I had to pay the water bill on my own now. I told them out loud that I understood they were having fun, but I couldn't afford it. The water turned off. I said thank you and sat down. When you grow up with this kind of thing, you get numb to it after a while. Not completely, but enough.